In today's video, we're going to be having a look at what the RBNZ has said about monetary policy. We're also going to be having a quick look at the Australian payroll figures and how some states are diverging, and a mix of other news all for you today. Hello and welcome to another ACY Securities Market Update. My name is Alistair Schultz and I'm going to be your host through today's trading journey. The first thing I'm looking at today is just a general overview of what's going on. Markets have been quite mixed. We've got gold tumbling down 5%. Silver following suit but hitting 13%. The S&P 500 has a little tumble, and we've also seen US Treasuries rise, Australian futures rise, and the Japanese futures are up as well. Now, what's interesting enough about these certain markets that have gone up and or down is that both gold and silver have tumbled at roughly the same time that we've seen bond yields come up a little bit in the US. Now, traditionally, you would see that being the normal case, and it's no different today. However, the one thing to play into point is that usually when we've seen bond treasuries or the 10-year bonds going up in yield values, we've seen that percentage rise a lot. At the moment, something to remember is that they're all still pretty much nearing 0%, if not negative. So regardless of that, we've had a tumble on the gold price, which is equated to more than $100 per ounce. Now, moving on from the overview, we're having a look today at what's going on in the US election race. Joe Biden has selected his running mate, and that is Senator Kamala Harris. Now, she's known to be an aggressive campaigner, but it's been selected to be quite a good one, supposedly, because of the idea of going for votes of the black community and some of those that might be a little bit disproportionately affected by coronavirus. So, coming up to the election, this is going to be all the more important when it comes to November. Now, moving on from the election of the US, we have some news about CBA. Commonwealth Bank Australia did put out their earnings reports this morning, and we have seen that they've absorbed a fair bit of their losses from COVID-19. Now, the big ones that are pushing into their earnings is really coming from loan losses because we've had deferment of people being able to afford their mortgages and business loans. So the dividend is dropped to 98 cents. The full year dividend is now $2.98, which is 31% down this time last year. We've also seen an 11.3% drop in their total cash profits. So Commonwealth Bank is still making money. They've just not made as much as they usually would have. Something to consider if you are looking at potentially purchasing shares. Now, moving on again, Australia has had some issues when it comes to their Victorian COVID-19 situation, and undoubtedly so, we've also seen issues with their business side of things. Employees losing jobs and vice versa. Now, what's interesting to see is that we've almost got like a three-geared approach to our payroll efforts. Western Australia, who has largely been supported by iron ore prices and mining, and obviously been remotely cut off from the rest of Australia, particularly with the COVID situation, has actually had a pretty good run. They're almost at pre-COVID levels of operations, and that includes in services, industries, and hospitality. Now, New South Wales, who are potentially facing another possible lockdown, we're seeing consumer sentiment drop down quite significantly there. And of course, Victoria, who's in a new lockdown where business activity is all but at a standstill. Now, on the chart, you can see behind me, I've just got a little bit of a graph there for you to have a look at, and that shows that payroll data is diverging between the three states. Obviously, Victoria is at the bottom of that list, whilst the top is Western Australia. So an interesting case to be. It's not something that's been seen here really in Australia before, and it seems to be an outcome of direct lockdown behaviours. So let's keep an eye on that, because I'm actually quite interested, and I think there will be something more to come from it down the track. Now, having a look at other things that are going on in the market, Tesla has followed suit from what Apple's example has been earlier in the week. We saw at the end of July that Apple was deciding about whether they were going to split their shares or not to try and make them more accessible to the underprivileged investor, or perhaps the investor who might have been priced out by the extreme rises. Tesla's looking to do the same thing. They're going to be doing a split where it's a 5-to-1 change. Now, because of that, it will make it more accessible. It does feel a little bit like a cash grab to me because it enables them to realistically get more shares again. And it might mean that you end up seeing that some of those shares that were $1,600 before, which is still going to be there, but the split down is likely going to result in similar sort of behaviors where we'll get very quick jump up in price. So moving on from Tesla, we then have some more talk about vaccine. There is a lot of news in the day overnight, so I'm going to go through it as fast as I can for you, so it's a quick video, but either way, we're going to have a talk about this. Now, Putin has announced, Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced that there's been an approved vaccine going out for Russia. The Philippines are going to be set to have the first run of doses there, but there's been a lot of controversy around it and skepticism. The WHO is saying that maybe some of the protocols haven't been met and perhaps some of the testing that's required really hasn't been there and there are corners being cut. And a key thing, or a rebuke from the President Vladimir Putin, was that he said it was good enough. So if it is good enough, that's kind of a lot to be putting your life in the hands of something that might just be good enough. But we don't know at this stage. More testing will need to be done. So other than that, though, we've also heard from Moderna Incorporated, who have already signed a deal for 100 million doses to be distributed across the US, pending the final stage of approvals for an actual FDA trial to continue. So at that point there, we might actually start seeing some vaccines come out towards the end of this year, beyond the Russian one. So I'm looking at the Russian one with a little bit of skepticism, but the rest we're going to have to keep an eye on to see how it does transpire. Of course, Moderna is still only in phase 3 trials, and you might end up seeing them bail out here. So we'll have to keep an eye on what happens exactly over the next coming weeks. Now, looking at what's going on in Auckland, or New Zealand, is back in lockdown. After 102 days of being virus-free, coronavirus has unfortunately come back. And what's even more concerning is that the 4 confirmed cases that they've found overnight, all from the same household, have no known transmissions. So they don't know where the virus has come from. Everyone else who does have coronavirus in Auckland and in New Zealand as a whole has really been in quarantine, and they've been told to wait there and stay in quarantine under pretty harsh conditions until otherwise allowed out and they have recovered. So it doesn't make sense as to where it's come from, and that is a little bit concerning for them. Now, looking as well at what the Reserve Bank of New Zealand has said, I was talking about this yesterday, and that I was quite excited to have a look at what the RBNZ was going to be doing about their monetary policy situation. I'd already anticipated that they wouldn't be likely to make any changes to the actual overnight cash rate. However, one of the things that stood out to me is this sentence that's written here behind me. I'm going to just read this out for you. The committee expressed a preference for considering a package of negative OCR and a funding for lending program, in addition to the current large-scale asset purchase program. So to me, that sounds like there's going to be more quantitative easing, and the RBNZ is quite interested in the idea of potentially going into negative interest rates. So that'll be definitely something to consider moving forward, and I think it's going to be a good opportunity for some trades coming up, especially if you're going to be trading the New Zealand dollar. Now, that's really all I have for today's news. Looking at what the news of ahead of today, we do have a press conference coming out that's just following up from the monetary policy reports from the Reserve Bank of New Zealand. We also have UK GDP occurring, US CPI, and we also have crude oil inventories for the US occurring as well. Now, if there's anything from today's video, perhaps one of the webinars or anything else that you would like to get in contact with me about, perhaps you want to ask a question, please feel free to get in contact with me. My socials are available on the screen behind me, but the best way is probably through talk2al@acy.com. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe to this video so you can get more great content from me and ACY Securities in the future. Have a great trading day ahead.